Welcome to the Deep Dive. For many of you listening, the creative life, well, it probably revolves around writing in some form.
Could be anything, really.
Hmm.
Technical docs, coding, maybe actual novels, or even, marketing briefs.
Exactly, and we spend a lot of time here digging into the craft, right?
Hmm.
Plot structure, character arcs, world-building mechanics, all that good stuff.
The nuts and bolts.
Yeah. But today, we're stepping back a bit. We want to talk about something maybe more fundamental, and honestly, maybe even more challenging for a lot of people.
Which is,
The life of a writer, or really any creative person. How do you actually sustain it?
yes, the sustainability question. It's crucial, and you're right, it's often overlooked. We get so focused on the output, the finished thing,
The book, the script, the campaign.
right, the product,
Yeah.
and we forget to maintain the engine, the person doing the creating.
Mm,
And if that engine sputters out,
right.
well, it doesn't matter how great your ideas are, nothing gets made.
That hits home. So our premise today is built on this simple truth. Writing isn't just about the words you manage to get on the page. It's about navigating everything else.
All the demands of modern life.
Yeah, the day job that pays the bills, relationships, kids, health stuff, just the sheer logistics of running a household. And somehow, amidst all that noise, holding space for creativity.
Not just space, but energy. Enthusiasm even.
Yeah.
Over the long haul.
Exactly. So the sources we're looking at today, they offer something like a toolkit, maybe even a blueprint for building that resilience, that longevity.
And that's really the mission for you, the listener, today. We're pulling apart these ideas focused on finding some kind of balance, building real emotional strength against setbacks.
Oh, the setbacks. We'll get to those.
Definitely. And keeping that creative fire, actually burning. Not just for one project, not just when you're feeling inspired, but over a whole career. Maybe decades.
Persisting when that initial, honeymoon phase is long gone.
That's the real test.
Okay, so we've kind of broken this down into three big challenges we want to unpack. First, the balancing act. Life versus work, carving out time and energy. It's the classic struggle.
The daily collision.
Second, rejection and criticism. Handling that emotional drain, staying motivated when everyone seems to be saying no. How do you bounce back from the 50th rejection?
Or the 500th. It happens.
Seriously. And finally, the really long game, sustaining creativity itself, keeping that momentum going year after year without just burning out completely.
And framing this for you listening, this really goes beyond just writing, doesn't it? If you're doing any kind of demanding creative work.
Painting, research, developing software, leading a team.
Exactly. Any kind of innovation, you face these same pressures, internal struggles, external demands. Our sources make it clear these challenges are pretty much universal.
And nobody gives you a manual for it when you start out.
No clear instructions.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at, I think, 4 specific approaches, kind of like a map to help navigate this whole journey.
All right, let's do it. Let's unpack this blueprint for a sustainable creative life. Starting with hurdle number 1, that balancing act, where creativity meets the cold, hard reality of the calendar.
Okay. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty.
So the core truth here, it seems pretty straightforward, but wow, the implications run deep. Writing or any creative work, it just constantly bumps up against, life.
Constantly. It's the day job. Maybe relationships needing attention, your own health, kids needing rides, parents needing care, just keeping the house from falling apart.
Right. And all those things are huge energy sinks. They demand time, focus, emotional bandwidth.
Absolutely. And the sources are really clear. If you sit around waiting for that magical, perfect block of time to just appear,
Like a whole quiet weekend with zero obligations. Good luck with that.
you'll likely never write consistently. Maybe a burst here and there, but not sustained work.
So the starting point has to be realizing creativity doesn't just politely wait its turn.
No, it doesn't wait for permission or perfect silence or for you to feel inspired. If you're serious about this, you have to actively carve out the time.
Carve it out. That sounds effortful.
It is. It takes intention,
Yeah.
planning, and sometimes just brutal honesty with yourself about where your time actually goes. Maybe tracking it for a week.
Ooh, scary thought. Okay, so how do we practically carve out that time? The sources talk a lot about consistency and routine.
Yes, and this is key. Consistency over intensity. That's the mantra.
Not intensity. We kind of glorify those crazy 8-hour writing binges, though, don't we?
We do. But think about it. How sustainable is that? How often can you really pull that off without burning out or neglecting everything else?
Yeah.
The goal here is continuity, showing up regularly.
Okay, so consistency. What does that look like?
Well, it's a critical psychological shift, especially when time feels incredibly tight. Instead of aiming for that exhausting marathon session on a Sunday.
Which leaves you wrecked for Monday.
Exactly. The sources really push this idea of flexible routines, often built around what they call micro-sessions.
Micro-sessions. Okay, tell me more. This sounds manageable. How does that work in practice? How do you actually get anything done in, like, 15 minutes?
Well, a micro-session is typically short, maybe 15 to 30 minutes, but the key is it's structured with a very clear, predefined, and measurable goal.
Okay, measurable. So not just work on my novel.
No, definitely not. That's too vague, too daunting for a short burst. The goal needs to be specific, like edit the first 3 paragraphs of this chapter, or find that one specific historical fact I need for this scene, or even just write 250 words, and they don't even have to be good words yet.
Okay, so the magic isn't really the amount you get done in that tiny slot.
It's the low barrier to entry, the reduced cognitive load.
Right, it turns those little pockets of time that usually just disappear
Waiting for a meeting, your lunch break, the 15 minutes before the kids wake up.
into actual productive output, even if it's small output.
Precisely. When the task feels small and specific, your brain doesn't hit the panic button like it does when faced with write chapter 3. It
Yeah.
just does the small thing.
And doing that small thing consistently.
That 20 minutes day after day, that's what builds real momentum over the long term. Much more reliably than those occasional, heroic, but ultimately exhausting sprints.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And this ties into managing expectations, right? And this idea of seasons in life.
Directly. You have to be, frankly, kind to yourself. Set realistic goals for output based on what your life actually looks like right now.
Not what you wish it looked like or what some productivity guru says it should look like.
Exactly. That dream of writing 2,000 words every single day, for most people with jobs and families, that's just a recipe for guilt and feeling like a failure.
So what's more realistic, according to the sources?
Maybe it's 500 words, maybe it's 300 words, but you hit it 4 days a week, consistently. That's still 1,200, 2,000 words a week. That steady progress feels achievable, and psychologically, that's much more rewarding than constantly missing an overly ambitious target.
Build the habit, not the guilt complex.
You got it. And then there are the seasons. Life changes. You might have a period with a new baby or a demanding new job, or maybe you're moving house or dealing with a health issue.
Life happens.
Life absolutely happens. And your writing goals have to adapt during those seasons. If you try to maintain the same output when everything else is in upheaval, you'll just crash the whole system. The creative practice needs to be flexible enough to bend, not break.
So it's not about giving up, but adjusting the pace.
Right. And there's a really crucial mindset shift the sources emphasize here. Creativity doesn't only thrive in perfect, quiet conditions. You know, the fantasy of the isolated cabin in the woods.
Yeah, the Thoreau fan.
It often flourishes despite imperfect conditions. Learning to work around the chaos, finding those micro sessions within the chaos, rather than always waiting for the chaos to magically clear. That's what separates the amateurs from the long-term professionals.
The job is to write, not to curate the perfect writing environment first.
Beautifully put. The job is to write.
But okay, adapting is one thing. What about protecting the time you do manage to carve out? The sources talk about boundaries.
Yes, adapting doesn't mean letting your writing time get constantly trampled. You have to protect that space, physically and temporally, even if it's just a corner of the kitchen table for 30 minutes.
Physical and temporal, meaning the place and the time slot.
Both. And protecting that requires clear, sometimes assertive, communication.
Uh-oh. The awkward conversations.
Can be, but you need to let your family, your partner, maybe even colleagues understand. This specific time slot is my dedicated writing time. It's about setting expectations, so when the door is closed or the do not disturb headphones are on, that time is respected.
How do you frame that so it doesn't sound selfish?
The sources suggest framing it not as a hobby you're indulging in, but as important work, a professional commitment that requires focus, just like a work meeting or an important call. It's part of your work.
And crucially, you have to respect that boundary yourself, right? It's so easy to schedule writing time and then check emails, scroll social media.
Oh, the self-sabotage is real. You absolutely have to honor that time yourself. Turn off the notifications. Put the phone in another room if you have to. Treat it like an appointment you wouldn't break. You're essentially training your brain. When I sit here, now this is what we do. We focus, we write.
Eliminate those context-switching costs.
Exactly. And this leads straight into another tough skill. Learning to say no.
No to distractions, no to extra commitments.
Yes. Saying no is how you actively defend your priorities. It might mean saying no to doom scrolling for an hour. It might mean declining a social event on a weekend when you know you need that time to recharge or write. It might mean stepping back from commitments that drain your energy but don't really align with your core goals.
That sounds hard and maybe a bit isolating.
It can be, which is why the concept of balance is so important. But the sources define balance in a really useful way.
Okay, how? Because perfect balance feels like a myth.
It probably is. They define balance not as some static, perfect equilibrium state you achieve once and for all. Instead, it's an ongoing negotiation.
A negotiation? Between what?
Between what truly matters to you, your writing, your key relationships, your health, and all the demands the world throws at you.
Yeah.
It's dynamic. It's always shifting.
So you start chasing perfect balance and start what? Making functional trade-offs.
That's a great way to put it. Functional trade-offs. It's about conscious choices. Give me an example.
Okay, let's say you really value that Saturday morning writing session. It's your prime creative time.
Right. But maybe your partner feels neglected because Saturdays are busy.
Exactly. So the negotiation might be, you protect that Saturday morning fiercely, but in return, you proactively offer to take on all the household chores Sunday afternoon or plan a dedicated date night.
Okay, so you're trading. You're showing the value you place on their needs too by offering something concrete in return for respecting your writing time.
Yeah. It turns it from a demand into a reciprocal arrangement that feels more sustainable, less likely to build resentment.
Precisely. That functional reciprocity, that ongoing negotiation, that's where you find the energy to maintain the boundaries and keep the creative engine fueled. It's not perfect,
Yeah.
but it works.
Okay, that idea of functional equilibrium, managing the trade-offs, that's vital. Because let's say you do manage it, you carve out the time, you protect it, you actually finish something.
A huge accomplishment in itself.
Right. But then comes the next potentially soul-crushing hurdle, putting it out there and facing rejection or criticism.
Ah, yes, the emotional gauntlet. This is where so many potentially great creatives just stop. They can't weather this part.
It feels so personal, doesn't it? And the sources are really blunt about this. Rejection is universal.
Completely universal. They make the point really clearly. Every single successful author you admire, every creative whose work resonates with you, they've been rejected. Probably dozens, maybe hundreds, maybe even thousands of times over their career.
Wow. Thousands.
It's not uncommon in fields like fiction writing or screenwriting. Rejection isn't a sign you're on the wrong path. It is the path. It's baked into the process.
Okay, so if everyone gets rejected, the difference isn't whether you get rejected, but how you handle it, how you respond.
That's the absolute differentiator.
Yeah.
How do persistent, successful creatives respond to rejection and criticism? That's what matters. They develop systems for processing the emotional hit without letting it completely derail their momentum.
Requires some serious emotional intelligence, or maybe just thick skin.
Thick skin helps, but it's more about resilience, which is something you can build. The goal isn't to become numb so it doesn't hurt at all. It's to develop ways to feel the sting, acknowledge it, and still keep moving forward.
Okay, so how do we build that resilience? The sources lay out a pretty clear four-step process for this.
Yes, a kind of psychological toolkit for reframing rejection and using criticism constructively.
Let's break it down. Step one is reframe. Why start there? Why is that mental shift so important?
Because your initial gut reaction to rejection is often emotional and catastrophic. They hate it. I'm a terrible writer. I should just give up. Reframing immediately interrupts that spiral.
How do you reframe it? What's the new frame?
You view rejection primarily as feedback or data, not as a final damning judgment on your talent or your worth.
Okay. Data. That sounds colder, less painful.
It helps. A no today doesn't automatically mean never. It might mean the timing was wrong for that specific publication or agent. It might mean it wasn't the right fit for their particular taste. Or, yes, it might mean there is a weakness in the work that needs addressing.
So distinguishing between taste rejection and craft rejection.
That's a really important distinction. Sometimes it's just subjective fit. Other times it's pointing to something objective you can actually improve. The reframe helps you start sorting that out instead of just feeling crushed. Yeah. It turns the slam door into potentially useful information.
Still tough, though, when you've poured your soul into something, which leads right into step two. Be selective. Filtering the feedback.
Yes, because once you're open to feedback, you risk getting overwhelmed or pulled in too many directions. Step two is crucial. Not all criticism is created equal. or even useful.
You can't please everyone.
You absolutely cannot, and the sources strongly warn against trying to blindly incorporate every single piece of advice you get. Some feedback is just one person's opinion. Some reflects a fundamental misfit, like they wanted a fast-paced thriller, and you wrote a slow-burn character study. Their feedback might be valid for the book they wanted, but not helpful for the book you wrote.
Okay, so how do you filter? What's the practical test for whether criticism is useful or just noise?
You need to apply a critical lens.
Mm.
Ask yourself two key questions about any piece of feedback. First, does this critique genuinely help me improve the mechanics, the clarity, or the emotional impact of this specific piece?
Okay, mechanics, clarity, impact.
Second, does this critique align with my original vision and intention for the project? Is it helping me achieve what I set out to do, or is it trying to turn it into something else entirely?
That second question feels really important for maintaining your own voice.
It's essential, and the sources offer a useful rule of thumb. Let's call it the rule of 3 or more.
Rule of 3.
If you get feedback from 3 or more different trusted readers, and they all independently point out the same fundamental issue, say, the pacing drags in the middle, or the main character's motivation feels fuzzy, or the ending feels rushed, then that's probably not just subjective taste.
That's likely actionable data, something you really need to look at.
Exactly, even if it's painful to hear. But if only one person says, you know, you should really make the dog talk, and that completely violates your gritty, realistic vision,
You can probably ignore the talking dog suggestion.
you can safely file that under interesting opinion, but not for this project. Selectivity is your shield against losing your way.
Right. Protect the core vision. Okay, step 3 seems to tackle the identity crisis that rejection often triggers.
Yes. Step 3. Practice emotional resilience by shifting your identity. This is huge. You have to actively work to minimize tying your fundamental sense of self-worth, your core identity, to external outcomes.
Outcomes like getting published, getting the contract, making the bestseller list.
Precisely. Those things are wonderful if they happen, but they are outcomes, largely outside your direct control. Your worth, your identity as a creative person, needs to be anchored somewhere else.
Where?
In the process, in the craft itself, in the discipline of showing up, in the effort you put in the act of writing or creating day after day.
So the reframing is, I am a writer because I write, not I am a writer because I got published.
Exactly that. The sources put it beautifully. You are a writer before you are a published writer. That identity, based on your actions and commitment, is something no rejection letter can take away from you.
That feels empowering. Divorce identity from outcome.
It's a game changer for psychological longevity.
Oh.
When rejection comes, it still stings, but it feels more like market feedback or data about that specific piece, not a judgment on you as a person or a creator.
Okay, that's a powerful internal shift. And then, step 4 acknowledges you probably can't do all this heavy emotional lifting alone.
No, we're not meant to. Step 4, build a support system. This is non-negotiable. Writing groups, mentors, trusted critique partners, even just supportive friends or family, they are your scaffolding.
What do they provide specifically?
3 essential things, usually. 1, objective perspective. They can help you see if a rejection is just bad luck or if there's a real issue you're too close to see. 2, shared experience. Just knowing others go through the exact same struggles makes it feel less isolating.
Misery loves company.
Sometimes, but also shared strategies. And 3rd, encouragement.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need someone to say, hey, that rejection sucks, but the piece is good. Keep going.
And the sources mention needing different kinds of support.
Yes, this is important.
Yeah.
You need your critique partners,
Yeah.
the people who will give you tough, honest feedback on the work itself. This chapter isn't working. But you also need your emotional support system, the friend you can just vent to about how unfair the industry feels, who will just listen and sympathize, not try to fix it.
Knowing who to go to for what. Don't ask your kindest friend for brutal critique. And don't expect your toughest critiquer to just offer hugs.
Exactly. Match the need to the right support. It prevents misunderstandings and ensures you get what you actually need in that moment. And it just reminds you again and again, you are not alone in this struggle.
Okay, so we reframe, we filter, we anchor our identity in the process, and we lean on our support systems. What else helps counterbalance all that negativity?
Actively celebrating the wins, even the small ones. This is crucial.
Counteracting the weight of rejection by acknowledging progress.
Yes. We tend to focus on the rejections, the failures, the things that didn't work. We need to deliberately shift focus sometimes with what did work. What progress did you make?
What counts as a small win worth celebrating?
Anything that marks progress or persistence. Finishing a tough revision. Completing a chapter, even a messy first draft of one. Sending out a query letter or a submission. The act of putting yourself out there is a win, regardless of the outcome. Hitting your word count goal for the week.
So not just waiting for the book deal to crack open the champagne.
Definitely not. Acknowledge the milestones along the way. Maybe it's just telling a friend, hey, I finished that chapter. Maybe it's treating yourself to a nice coffee. These small acts reinforce the positive side of the process, provide those little dopamine hits, and fuel the engine to keep going when the rejections pile up. They remind you that you are moving forward.
I like that, celebrating the journey, not just the destination. Okay, so that focus on process shifts us nicely into the next big challenge. The long haul. We've figured out, maybe, how to balance time, how to handle rejection, but how do we keep the actual creative spark alive, year after year?
This is where it gets really interesting, as you said earlier, because the sources are unanimous.
Yeah.
Writing, or any serious creative pursuit, it's explicitly defined as a long walk, not a sprint.
A marathon, not a 100-meter dash.
Exactly. And the core challenge of the marathon is, well, it gets boring sometimes. The path gets monotonous. You hit plateaus. How you keep putting one foot in front of the other creatively when the initial excitement is gone, and maybe you feel like you're running out of ideas.
How do you keep that fire lit? Prevent burnout? Fight off stagnation?
It requires deliberate effort. It's not passive. You have
Yeah.
to actively work on rejuvenating the creative mind.
Okay, rejuvenation strategies. What's first on the list? The sources mention something foundational, almost obvious, but easily neglected.
Keep reading, and reading widely, outside your specific genre or field.
Why widely? If I write sci-fi, why read, say, historical romance or poetry?
Because exposure to different voices, different structures, different ideas, different ways of using language,
Yeah.
it fundamentally replenishes your own creative well. It's like cross-training for your brain.
Cross-training. I like that.
If you only read within your narrow niche, your own writing risks becoming stale, predictable, maybe even derivative over time. Your vocabulary shrinks. Your sentence rhythms become monotonous. Your plot ideas start echoing what you just read.
So reading poetry might improve my thriller prose. Reading history might help my fantasy world building.
Absolutely. Poetry teaches compression, rhythm, potent imagery, makes any prose sharper. History gives you endless plots, character motivations, societal structures, fascinating details you can borrow and adapt. The best creatives, the sources suggest, are like intellectual magpies.
Shiny ideas from everywhere.
Exactly. Constantly picking up interesting bits from adjacent fields and bringing them back to their own nest. Reading widely is like continuous, almost effortless professional development. It keeps your mental toolkit sharp and diverse.
Okay, so feed the brain. What else? What if you feel genuinely stuck, like in a rut?
Then you need to actively change things up. The forces recommend combating that feeling of stagnation by deliberately shifting your focus, sometimes to something completely different. They talk about low-stakes play.
Low-stakes play. That sounds fun. What does it mean?
It means creating something just for the fun of it, without the pressure of it having to be good or commercially viable or part of your main project.
An example.
Okay, if you usually write intricate, deeply researched historical novels, maybe try writing a silly 1,000-word flash fiction piece about talking squirrels. Or write a poem. Or try drawing a character sketch instead of describing them.
Something completely different, just to loosen up the creative muscles.
Precisely. The goal is to break out of your usual patterns, to reconnect with the simple joy of making something new without the weight of expectation. It reminds you to keep the joy.
Ah, the joy factor. Easy to lose sight of that under deadlines and pressure.
So easy. But if the underlying pleasure of telling stories or solving creative problems disappears completely, the work becomes a grind. And grinds are rarely sustainable long-term, no matter the external rewards. Low-stakes play helps keep that intrinsic motivation alive.
Okay, read widely, play around. What about practical strategies for just keeping the momentum on the main project going, especially when it feels overwhelming?
This loops back to our earlier talk about routines, but viewed through the lens of longevity. The key is, set manageable goals and maybe even track them visually.
Manageable. Again, not finish the novel next month.
Definitely not. Avoid those huge, vague, overwhelming goals. They just invite procrastination and panic. Instead, break it down. Write 300 words a day, 4 days this week, or revise one scene today, or research this specific aspect for 1 hour.
Small, concrete, achievable steps.
Yes, This structure ensures steady, cumulative progress. You might not feel like you're making giant leaps, but those small, consistent steps add up enormously over weeks and months. Steady progress wins the long game, almost always. It avoids the boom and bust cycle of intense work followed by burnout.
And what happens when you sit down for that manageable session and nothing comes? The dreaded blank page stare, the well feels completely dry.
That's when you need your emergency reserves. This is where the habit of documenting ideas becomes absolutely critical, your creative stash.
The stash. Okay, what goes in the stash?
Anything. A line of dialogue you overheard, a weird dream image, a link to an interesting article, a photo that sparked something, a what-if question. Quick voice notes on your phone, snippets in a journal, a dedicated file on your computer.
A collection of creative seeds.
Exactly. And when you feel empty, when the blank page is mocking you, you don't just sit there in despair. You go to your stash. You browse through those collected seeds.
What does that do?
Often it jumpstarts something. It reminds you that you do have ideas, you're just tired or stressed right now. It gives you a starting point, a little nudge. It's like a creative emergency fund you've been contributing to all along. It can be a lifesaver against burnout and block.
I love that, the creative emergency fund. Okay, another concept the sources highlight, which feels incredibly freeing, is the iterative mindset. You called it the cure for perfection paralysis.
It really is the ultimate antidote, I think. The iterative mindset means you fully embrace, even celebrate, the idea that creativity is a process of refinement. Multiple drafts are not a sign of failure, they are the method.
So, ditching the myth of the perfect first draft.
Absolutely demolishing that myth. It's maybe the single most damaging idea for aspiring creatives. Almost no one produces polished brilliance on the first try. First drafts are supposed to be messy. They're about getting the raw material down, exploring the ideas, finding the shape of the thing.
So getting the clay on the wheel?
Perfect analogy. The first draft is the lump of clay. Revision is where you shape it, refine it, where the real artistry often happens. Thinking this way, viewing writing as building layers, frees you from that crippling fear of the first draft not being good enough.
That fear, perfection paralysis, what does that actually look like? How does it stop people?
It's that state where you're so afraid of writing a bad sentence or a weak chapter that you can't write anything. You're editing line by line before you even have a paragraph. You're agonizing over word choices in chapter 1 when you haven't even figured out the ending. You're stuck, frozen by the impossible standard of perfection right out of the gate.
Been there.
We all have. The iterative mindset gives you permission to write that bad first draft. It says, your only job right now is to get it down. Make it exist. You can and you will make it better later. That permission to fail forward unlocks tremendous creative energy.
Permission to be imperfect. That's powerful. Okay, and finally, underpinning all of this, the routines, the resilience, the iteration, is the actual human doing the work, self-care.
Yes, and the sources are adamant. Self-care is not a fluffy add-on or reward you get after you've been productive.
Right.
It is fundamental creative fuel.
Not a luxury, but a necessity for the engine to run.
Absolutely. Creativity comes from a human being, and that human being needs to be cared for, physically and mentally. The sources explicitly link creative output to things like adequate rest, regular movement or exercise, meaningful connection with others.
And sometimes just downtime, doing nothing.
Yes. Allowing your mind to wander, to be bored occasionally, without constantly feeding it stimulation or demanding productivity. We often think of these things, sleep, exercise, socializing, relaxing, as taking time away from creative work.
Right, like they're in competition.
But the sources argue they are essential inputs. They replenish the well, they allow for subconscious processing and incubation of ideas, those breakthroughs that often come when you're in the shower or out for a walk, not when you're staring intensely at the screen. Treating yourself like a complex organism that needs balance, not like a machine you can just run 24/7, is key to long-term sustainable creativity.
Feed the artist, not just the art.
Exactly. Care for the human behind the keyboard.
Okay, caring for the human. That feels like a perfect bridge to our last section, integration and purpose. Because we've talked a lot about carving out time, setting boundaries, kind of separating writing from life.
Creating those protected spaces.
But the sources suggest the ultimate goal for a truly sustainable creative life isn't actually rigid separation forever. It's something more like graceful integration.
Exactly. If we pull back and look at the bigger picture, the aim isn't to build higher walls between your writing self and your life self. It's about finding ways for them to coexist, even enrich each other.
So your identity as a writer doesn't just switch off when life gets busy.
And importantly, your regular life doesn't stop feeding your creativity just because you're in writing mode.
Integration means letting them inform each other.
Constantly. Allowing your writing life and your everyday life to fuel one another. The sources really emphasize this. Some of your most potent, most original material comes directly from the messy, stressful, joyful, mundane reality of just living.
So instead of seeing daily life as an interruption to writing,
See it as the raw material for writing.
I love that reframe.
Think about it. That frustrating conversation with a colleague, the weird dynamics in your family, that moment of unexpected kindness from a stranger, the sheer logistical nightmare of getting kids ready in the morning.
All potential story fuel. Character insights, dialogue snippets, emotional truths.
Exactly. These aren't distractions preventing you from writing. They are observations, emotional data, insights into the human condition that make your stories richer, your characters more believable, your dialogue more authentic.
So if you try to completely shut out life to write, you risk starving your writing.
You risk writing in a vacuum. Your work might become sterile, disconnected from lived reality. The writer's job, arguably, isn't to escape life, but to observe it, engage with it, process it, and reflect it back in meaningful ways.
Okay, observe life, don't escape it. But how does that square with the need for boundaries we just talked so much about? If you're integrating everything, don't the boundaries dissolve?
That's the paradox, isn't it? But it seems like good, clear boundaries actually make healthy integration possible. They aren't mutually exclusive.
How so?
Well, if writing is truly a priority, part of your integrated life, you need to set realistic expectations around it.
Yeah.
And crucially, as we discussed, communicate those expectations clearly.
To partners, family, friends.
Yes, and the sources suggest that if people understand why this matters to you, understand the deeper purpose behind it, they are far more likely to respect the boundaries you need to actually do the work. That vulnerability and clarity in communication often builds support, not resentment.
So boundaries aren't just about keeping people out during writing time.
They're also about managing the social contract around your creative work. They manage expectations, both externally and internal.
Internally too, how?
By clarifying for yourself when you are on in focused creative mode and when you are off, fully present for family, friends, rest, or other parts of life. That clear distinction, enabled by boundaries, allows for a mental switch.
Prevents you from feeling guilty when you're not writing or resentful of life when you are trying to write.
Exactly. It reduces that internal friction and frustration. Good boundaries allow you to be more fully present and engaged in whichever zone you're currently in, making the integration feel less chaotic and more intentional.
Okay, that makes sense. Boundaries enabling integration, not preventing it. And finally, when all these systems, all these efforts, the time carving, the boundary setting, the resilience building, this whole struggle for integration, when it all just feels like too much, too hard.
Ah, yes. The inevitable moments of overwhelm or doubt. Why am I even doing this?
Right. What's the ultimate fail-safe, the most powerful tool?
According to the sources, it always comes back to reconnecting with your core purpose,
Huh.
your fundamental why.
Revisiting the why.
When the external pressures are mounting, when the rejections pile up, when the work feels thankless or pointless, the only thing strong enough to consistently reignite that long-term motivation is remembering why you started in the first place.
And the why can't just be about external validation.
The sources are very clear on this. The why is almost never just to get published or to make money or to be famous. Those are outcomes. They are fragile motivators because they depend on external factors you don't control.
So the real why has to be deeper, intrinsic.
Exactly. It's the underlying internal drive. Because I love the intellectual challenge of solving complex story problems, or because I feel compelled to explore this particular theme, or because I want to create beauty or understanding in the world, or because telling stories helps me make sense of my own life, or because I want other people to feel less alone.
Finding that personal, unshakable reason.
Yes, reconnecting with that core purpose is what ultimately fuels the long walk. It's what makes negotiating the challenges of life feel worthwhile. It provides the sustainable internal engine for a lifetime of creative work, regardless of the external ups and downs.
Wow. Okay. So let's try to wrap this up for our listeners. What does this all mean, practically? We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. I think the core message is that a sustainable creative life isn't accidental.
Yeah.
It has to be consciously built and maintained.
Right. We've looked at the non-negotiables, actively carving out time, even tiny bits, through things like micro sessions, constantly negotiating and protecting boundaries with clear communication, building that deep emotional resilience, reframing rejection, being selective with feedback, anchoring your identity in the process, not the outcome.
hmm And keeping the creative joy alive. Reading widely, playing creatively, setting manageable goals, using an iterative mindset, and crucially, prioritizing self-care as actual fuel.
The key takeaway really seems to be you're not just trying to finish one project, one book, one painting. You're trying to build a writing life or creative life, a whole sustainable system for living and creating over the long term.
Yes, and the sources essentially give us the operating manual for that system. A manual that recognizes creative output is deeply, fundamentally linked to your physical, mental, and emotional well-being and how you navigate the world around you.
So, as we close out this deep dive, maybe a final thought or question for you, the listener, to chew on. Based on that idea of integration, of life feeding art.
Yeah, this raises a really interesting question. Given that your everyday life is your primary source material, where in your busy, maybe stressful, maybe mundane life right now are the stories hiding?
What overlooked detail in your daily routine? What frustrating problem you keep facing? What tiny moment of beauty or connection you almost missed? Could that be the thing that fuels your next creative breakthrough?
It's worth considering. May your next creative session feel truly purposeful. May those inevitable rejections feel more like stepping stones than roadblocks.
Yeah.
And may your unique creative fire remain alive and well, fed by the richness, the complexity, and even the challenges of the life you are actively living right now.